You won't believe how a simple flag on my porch turned into a neighborhood battle that had everyone talking. It all started on a sunny Saturday morning, the kind where the air feels calm but the tension is hiding just beneath the surface. I had just raised my American flag on the porch, proud and steady when she showed up, Karen. Now, you probably know the type. Always watching from her window, always ready with a complaint, and somehow always feeling like she ran the neighborhood, even though we had an HOA for that. She strutted across my lawn like it belonged to her, clutching her little HOA rulebook as if it were a weapon. "Excuse me," she barked. "That flag is tacky, and it makes the street look unkempt. Take it down before I report you to the HOA." I was stunned. Tacky? This wasn't just any decoration. It was a flag I flew to honor those who served, my family included. I calmly told her the flag wasn't violating any rules. But Karen wasn't the kind of person to let things go. She smirked, leaned in, and said something I'll never forget. "Not everyone wants to be reminded of all that. Maybe you should save your patriotism for inside your house." Inside my house? That's when I realized this wasn't about the HOA. This was about control. She wanted to shame me into silence. But what Karen didn't know was that across the street lived Jake, my neighbor, a decorated veteran who had served 2 tours overseas. He had been quietly sipping his coffee on his porch, watching the entire confrontation unfold. And when he heard her mocking tone, I saw something change in his eyes. He put his cup down, stood tall, and marched over with the kind of presence that instantly commands respect. Karen's smirk faded, but she tried to hold her ground. Jake didn't yell. He didn't argue. He simply looked at her and said, "That flag isn't tacky. It represents every sacrifice, made by people who gave you the freedom to complain about it. If you have a problem with that, you have a problem with me." The silence was electric. Karen stumbled over her words, muttered something about HOA rules, and scurried back to her house. But that was only the beginning, because Jake had an idea, one that would make sure Karen and everyone else understood the meaning behind that flag. And let me tell you, when he put his plan into motion, the entire neighborhood couldn't stop talking. The morning after Karen's little outburst, the neighborhood was buzzing. Some people whispered that she had gone too far. Others shrugged it off as classic Karen behavior. But what none of us expected was Jake's quiet but powerful response. At dawn, before most people even had their first cup of coffee, Jake stepped out onto his porch. He wasn't carrying his usual mug this time. He was holding a flag. Not just any flag, either. It was massive, easily twice the size of mine, folded with military precision. He moved with the kind of discipline you could tell had been drilled into him long ago. Without saying a word, he crossed his yard, walked to the tallest pole in his driveway, and began raising that flag higher than anything else in sight. The fabric unfurled, catching the morning light, and within seconds the breeze had it snapping proudly in the air. It towered over every house on the street, bold and unapologetic. Neighbors peeked out their windows. A few even stepped outside to watch. You could feel it, the shift in the air, as if his actions had reset the tone of the entire block. And then, right on cue, Karen came storming out of her house, hair still in curlers, robe flapping behind her. She looked like a storm cloud ready to unleash thunder. "Are you kidding me?" she screeched, pointing at Jake's towering flag. "This is harassment." "First him," she jabbed her finger toward me. "And now you? This isn't some kind of military base. It's a neighborhood. We have standards." Jake didn't flinch. He finished securing the halyard, took one step back, and saluted the flag with crisp precision. That simple gesture made her rant seem even smaller, pettier. He finally turned, calm as ever, and said, "These colors don't harass anyone. They protect everyone, even you." Karen's jaw dropped. She looked around, expecting support from the neighbors. But instead of nodding in agreement, most of them were clapping, some softly, some louder, until the letter from the HOA arrived in a plain white envelope. But its contents might as well have been written in flashing red ink. The notice declared that both my modest porch flag and Jake's towering banner were in violation of the HOA's aesthetic uniformity clause. If we didn't remove them within 10 days, we'd be fined, and if we still refused, the HOA threatened legal action. I remember staring at the paper, my stomach twisting. A fine for a flag? It felt absurd. But then I looked across the street at Jake. He wasn't rattled at all. In fact, he looked almost amused. "Let them try," he said, folding the notice neatly. "I've faced enemies stronger than an HOA committee." But while Jake was calm, the neighborhood was buzzing. Some residents worried about their property values. Others feared Karen's influence. After all, she was practically the HOA's unofficial spokesperson. Yet many quietly supported us, whispering encouragement whenever Karen wasn't looking. The showdown came faster than expected. At the next HOA meeting, Karen marched in like a queen entering her court. She wore a smug grin, binder clutched to her chest, ready to restore order to the neighborhood. She wasted no time, pointing her finger like a dagger. "These flags," she declared, "are gaudy, distracting, and against everything our community stands for. We need to enforce the rules before this place starts looking like a carnival." Gasps echoed around the room. People shifted uncomfortably, but Karen seemed convinced she had the room under her thumb. That's when Jake stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't wave his arms. He simply walked to the front, stood tall, and began to speak. His voice was steady, carrying a weight that silenced every whisper. "I fought for this country. I watched friends lay down their lives so these colors could fly free. And you're telling me that a piece of fabric on my property, flown with respect, is somehow offensive?" He paused, scanning the room. "If that's the case, then maybe we should ask ourselves, what exactly does this neighborhood stand for?" The silence was thick. Even Karen looked rattled, though she quickly tried to recover with mutters about bylaws and regulations. But Jake wasn't finished. He pulled out a binder of his own research he'd done on state and federal laws protecting the right to fly the American flag. He laid it on the table with a quiet finality. "You can fine me if you want," he said, "but you'll be fighting the law, not just me." The HOA members shifted nervously. Karen's face turned crimson. And at that moment, the tide began to turn. After Jake dropped that binder full of legal protections onto the HOA table, the room went silent. You could feel the tension shift. Suddenly, it wasn't just about flags anymore. It was about pride, principle, and whether the HOA dared to pick a fight they couldn't win. Karen, however, wasn't ready to give up her crown. She jabbed her finger at Jake and snapped, "You think you can bully this neighborhood with your military theatrics? This isn't about patriotism, it's about rules." Jake didn't flinch. "The rules of this country outrank the rules of a homeowners association," he said firmly. "And the law is clear. The American flag is protected. No HOA, no Karen can strip that away." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Some neighbors even started clapping softly, though Karen shot them sharp looks to silence them. The HOA board shuffled their papers, clearly uncomfortable. They hadn't expected Jake to show up prepared, let alone to challenge them on legal grounds. Finally, the president of the HOA cleared his throat and admitted, "Given the laws in place, we can't enforce removal of either flag. The notices are hereby withdrawn." It was official. We had won. Karen gasped, sputtered, and stormed out, her heels clicking furiously against the tile floor. But Jake wasn't done making a statement. The very next morning, he invited me and several neighbors over to his yard. Together, we raised an even taller flagpole, one so high it soared above every rooftop on the street. Jake led the group in a salute as the massive flag unfurled, its colors glowing against the bright sky. And here's the best part. One by one, other neighbors began putting up their own flags. Small ones, porch-sized, garden-sized, it didn't matter. Within a week, nearly every house on our block was flying the red, white, and blue. What had started as Karen's attempt to silence me had transformed into a neighborhood-wide show of unity. Karen, of course, fumed. She stayed inside most days, peeking through her blinds like a general who had lost her war. But the truth was clear. She'd been outmatched, not just by Jake's resolve, but by the spirit of the entire community. That flag on my porch, the one she mocked, was still standing, and thanks to Jake, it now waved proudly among dozens of others. What began as one woman's complaint ended as a reminder. Some things are bigger than HOA bylaws. Some symbols are worth defending. And when the right people stand together, no amount of pettiness can tear them down. Enjoying this kind of real-life neighborhood drama? Tap that subscribe button for more stories where ordinary people stand up against extraordinary nonsense. And if you liked how this one turned out, give it a thumbs up. It really helps. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. What would you have done if Karen came after your flag? Let me know below.